Yes, I retired as a professor from Stellenbosch University last year, and I'm now Professor Emeritus. So I'm not, as what you would say, a practicing professor. I do the odd professorial thing for them, but my permanent employment is with the Public Service Commission at present.
Thank you. But you are currently a commissioner at the Public Service Commission?
That is correct, Chair.
If you look at page 38 of your statement, is that your signature that is appended on that page?
It is, Chairperson.
And it's reflected that it was signed on the 27th of August 2014, am I correct?
You are correct, Chairperson.
Now, let's proceed then to your statement on paragraph 2 thereof. You indicate that you are appointed as the chairperson of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts, Scopa, during April 1999, and you served as such until you resigned on 1 March 2002. Is that correct?
Yes, Chairperson.
Did you resign at the end of your term, or what were the reasons for your resignation?
I resigned before the end of my term under particular circumstances.
Are you at liberty to tell us about those circumstances?
I am. Would you wish that? My resignation primarily came about as a result of the first investigation into the arms deal, the one of the Director of Public Prosecutions, the Auditor General, and the Public Protector, in that I believe their final report, the findings in their final report, to have been somewhat fraudulent and to not have carried out the instructions that had come via Scopa and through the National Assembly. In addition to there being this waste of taxpayers' money in conducting that investigation and producing such a report, I was also aggrieved by the numerous interventions that had taken place from members of the executive at the time, and indeed from senior officials of Parliament, interventions which served to circumvent the investigation and further served to circumvent the work of Scopa in monitoring that investigation. So that was the primary cause of my premature resignation. But politics being what it is, that whole saga manifested into other developments within Scopa, where it got to the point where everything I did or said was regarded with suspicion by the majority of the members in the committee, who belonged to the majority party. So the Public Accounts Committee became dysfunctional and, in my opinion, stopped doing the valuable work which it ought to be doing. So not only in protest about the arms deal investigation, also in the interests of the committee finding a new chair and being allowed to regain its momentum, I resigned.
Thank you. I see on page 39 also you have attached your curriculum vitae. Am I correct?
Yes, you are.
And I'll just mention the highlights of your curriculum vitae. And it mentions that you were a member of parliament in South Africa for 15 years. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And currently you are serving as a commissioner at the Public Service Commission of South Africa. That is from January 2013 to present.
That is correct.
You have been also a professor in public finance management at University of Stellenbosch, involving teaching honor students and masters and supervising doctorate students in research.
Correct.
You also have served as in the various committees of Parliament. Amongst them, you were the chair of the subcommittee which researched and wrote the Public Finance Management Act 1999. Am I correct?
You are correct.
And as mentioned earlier, you're also the chairperson of Scopa.
Yes.
I see you also mention the fact that you have been involved in research and you have co-authored certain publications and books.
That is correct.
And you mentioned that amongst the books, you are the co-author of the best-selling academic textbook, Managing Public Money, first and second editions.
Correct.
And lastly, you say you have recently completed a university textbook on public finance theory and practice, which is due for publication in 2014.
That's correct. I'm not sure that the publishers will meet the deadline, but that's the plan.
Thank you, Dr. Hoos. Let's then go back to your statement on page 2. In paragraph 3, you just mentioned that you have been subpoenaed to give evidence that may be relevant to the acquisition of armaments, which form part of the special defense packages. Is that correct?
It is, yes.
And you also confirm that the facts in your statement are correct and within a personal knowledge to a certain extent.
Correct, yes.
Paragraph 5. You give the purpose of your statement. Can you take us through that paragraph 5 to explain the basis of a statement that you've made to the Commission?
What I'm alluding to here is that there have been no smoking guns, no absolutely conclusive evidence of corruption in the arms deal that has been put into the public domain. So in being subpoenaed to appear before the Commission, I just want to make it clear that I do not have any smoking guns. But what I do have is a great amount of what we might term indirect evidence, circumstantial evidence. Much of it based on allegations. I've been very selective with the allegations I refer to. They have to be substantive allegations produced by reputable people who can indicate that they have reputable sources. And it's all that evidence that I put together with some evidence which I would suggest to be more direct, informing and building a picture. I do this by building a number of arguments which I hope to convince the Commission as to the authenticity of those arguments and how those arguments ultimately fit together, how themes develop across and transverse those arguments, resulting in a picture which strongly suggests the probability of corruption having taken place in the arms deal. So that paragraph that you refer to is more about my approach and a little about my methodology.
Thank you. And in paragraph 6, you just mentioned that your statement is also made on the understanding that the Commission's responsibilities, both in terms of the Commission's Act 8 of 1947 and its terms of reference, go beyond simply accepting or rejecting the evidence it receives by those who testify before it. Can you just explain that?
I think it is exactly as it appears before you. I just want to put on record my understanding that the Commission has a job to do that is instructed by both the Act referred to and its terms of reference to conduct an inquiry, to conduct an investigation, its own investigation if necessary, and that the participation of us witnesses is simply to cooperate and to help you. And I would hope at the end of my presentation to have convinced you that there are some specific areas that you should look at, and that if you were to look at them, that you are likely to come a lot closer to the truth that has been so elusive thus far.
Thank you. In paragraph 7, you're simply mentioning that your statement will be relevant in respect of the Commission's terms of reference 1.5. Is that correct?
Yes, I respect that the Commission was given terms of reference, and that would be a fruitless exercise for me to speak or to produce evidence which wasn't relevant to the brief. So I do offer here reference 1.5 of the Commission's brief as being the item which I am attempting to respond to in giving evidence.
Thank you very much. And now we're proceeding in from paragraph 8 under the topic evidence of wide-ranging corruption in the international arms industry. So in paragraph 8, you're trying to give that background. Can you take us through that paragraph 8?
Yes, Chair, I believe it's important, or perhaps essential, that that what the Commission is inquiring into here is a particular industry. And it's an industry that has its own history, it has its own reputation, it has its own way of doing things. And I think we have to recognize, as Scopa did in its 14th report, the 14th report which gave birth to the first investigation, we there too said we must acknowledge that this industry is an industry that when we were looking into issues which are irregular, which might be corrupt, we need to bear in mind that it's an industry like no other. And I try to substantiate that as I've done throughout my statement, Chair, with a few references. If I could make a general statement that I have many thousands of documents of some degree of importance or other, and it was a matter of always trying to select a few which I thought would give weight or substantiate a point I was making. So in the case of me reminding everyone that the arms industry has its hard-earned reputation, that this is clear from a number of very deep research exercises, by statistics produced by the World Bank, by Transparency International, by other bodies, where it would seem there's consensus that it is the most corrupt industry in the world, and could corrupt for as much as half of the world's corruption, even though it accounts for only 1 or 2% of the world's trade. It gives us a sense of proportions, and it gives us a good idea of what we're working with here. And I think bear that in mind. I thought it was important for the statement I produced, and hopefully also for the Commission. But now I'm saying, notwithstanding this reputation, notwithstanding the huge collection of literature and research-based literature that's been produced on this industry, it would seem that the executive, in particular those executive members who made up what was called the Cabinet Subcommittee, put there by Cabinet at the time to oversee the processes, the structures, the practices that were utilized in evaluating all the bids for arms business, for the SDPs, and evaluate and be part of the selection, the decision-making process. That those executive members in particular, through documents that I offer you, showed themselves to be ignorant of the nature of the arms industry. And there was a certain naivety. And part of this first argument will be that it was that naivety and that ignorance that caused them to take the eye off the ball and just to trust the processes and trust the officials who produced them, who produced information for them and produced recommendations for them. And the three instances I produce here are firstly extracts from a press statement issued by the Cabinet Subcommittee.
Are you referring to the extract on page 43 of the bundle?
I'm sorry, Dr. Woods, can you perhaps try and talk into the mic, because we are really struggling to hear you. You're not as clear as Advocate Mpaka is.
Maybe you can take us through that annexure, GGW2.
Chair, your technical man did warn me prior to that I shouldn't talk directly into the mic because it creates a distortion. So I'm trying to get the compromise here so that you get everything on record clearly, but also that, of course, that you can hear me clearly. Can I ask you, is that sufficiently clear? Thank you. Right. Yes, I am referring to the annexure number 2 on page 43. And if I suppose firstly one could say it's the statements generally not acknowledging that the arms industry and its players were an issue, were even worth considering as possibly being people that you should be careful when you contract them with them, when you transact with them. I refer to the 5th paragraph, which is the second to bottom paragraph, where the government, in fact, expresses strong reservations on the statement made on prime contractors. And the only statement that was made was the one I referred to, where we, in our 14th report. Of course, they go on and to manipulate the statement and try to suggest that by making a statement we are reflecting on the integrity of the Cabinet Subcommittee. But if you look at the literal content of what we said, that is simply not correct. But they do show some resentment for the fact that we did offer a critique of the industry. We further when 3 of the members of the Cabinet Subcommittee appeared before Scopa, the issue again arose.
I think it's on page 57. You're referring to the comments which were made by the ministers at that hearing of the 26th of February 2001, Annexure GGW4, page 57.
Indeed I am. And on page 57, the 3rd paragraph from Minister Alex Irwin, he says, I would just like to draw your attention, which is not the subject of discussion, but very relevant. Your opening remark and introductory comment, by many accounts, the international arms trade industry experiences a high industry malpractice. And I think there's a typographical error here. It talks about many countries being victims. Mr. Irwin goes on to say, it is fairly clear that your view is your predisposition as a committee that there will be corruption accordingly for those responsible for the prime decisions. Once again, you can see it's a fantastic manipulation of words on Mr. Irwin's part, but at the same time, it's being dismissive of the observation which we include that the arms industry is one that has to be carefully dealt with when you buy goods from them. Then I conclude a 3rd reference, which comes from a letter which I think many have said is a controversial letter.
Before you go to that letter of the then Deputy President, can I also refer you on page 58? I think it's the comments made by the former Minister of Defense, Lekota. And I just want to hear your comments on what he's saying. He's on page 58, Chairperson and Commissioner Musi, the last paragraph of page 58. He says, this Committee of Parliament, one would assume that when it is faced with a matter like this one, whatever the World Bank may have said, I may think, for instance, that by the time they made that conclusion, they probably would have made studies of a number of cases. So they are drawing a conclusion like that at the end of an exercise like that. This committee has not in its history, I think, as such reason to start from this kind of premise in relation in this matter. My apologies. This committee has not in its history as such reason to start from this kind of premise in relation to this matter here. It is as good as a judge saying, who may have tried many cases, and now I am brought before such a judge, and he says, generally, I think Mosotho are prone to eat horse meat, and since this Mosotho is accused of having eaten horse meat. Can you comment on this?
Chairperson, Scopa oversaw the accounts and finances of hundreds of government institutions. Different government institutions doing very different things. Some very personnel intensive, others not. Some very procurement intensive, others not. Some that interfaced, where public officials interfaced with the public in a very direct way, others not. These were all considerations that we bore in mind when looking at the next set of accounts and where it came from. And I think that happens in many areas of work, of investigation, of auditing. You consider the peculiarities of the particular department, institution, or industry. That's all that we simply did here. For Minister Irwin in the first place to say that by doing that we were prejudicing the inquiry and prejudging it and reflecting on the integrity of the Cabinet Subcommittee, went to ridiculous lengths. Mr. Lecotta's comments went even further to suggest that that we were altogether prejudging situations and generalizing. It's just very unreasonable for them to try and suggest that.
Thank you. I think you wanted to refer the Commission to the letter of January 19, 2001, which was addressed to you in your capacity as the chairperson of Scopa, which letter was written by the then Deputy President, Mr. Jacob Zuma. It's on page 45 of the bundle. Can you refer us to specifics in that letter?
Yes, I continue on my argument that the executive was generally ignorant about the dark side of the arms industry. And that weakened their oversight and caused vulnerabilities in the processes. Vulnerabilities which I will later suggest and argue most probably led to corrupt activities. The letter that I'm referring to is a letter not without controversy. It was a letter written to me in the first person, and many references throughout the letter. What I'm saying is it wasn't referred to me as chairperson of Scopa, even though some of the content might appear that way. Other parts of the content of the letter are directed at me specifically. It's a very hostile letter. And part of the controversy and the speculation was that the letter possibly wasn't written by the person who signed it. It was signed by the then Deputy President, Jacob Zuma. The speculation is that it could have been written by the President at the time, President Thabo Mbeki. And I produced a number of arguments which raised questions. But of course, I don't know the truth to that answer. It is a bit unsettling. If it were to be written by Thabo Mbeki, it would be all the more improper. But either way, it was a member of the executive who makes many strong statements, but on page 48, the first paragraph, he takes exception to the 14th report having said, by many accounts, the international arms industry experiences a high incidence of malpractice, with purchasing companies often having been the victims of very costly exploitation. The writer says, with this in mind, the committee has considered the transactions and the broader financial and fiscal implications pertaining to the recent South African arms purchases. He says that in quoting Scopa's report. But then the writer raises the question, who gave what accounts to Scopa? And goes on to quote Scopa having said, with international armaments markets having recovered, the committee feels that the large commitments by suppliers might now be resisted and even reneged upon, with South Africa unlikely to be a serious arms purchaser over the next few decades. This possibly needs to be watched closely. And there again, I'm challenged where he asks, what study has Scopa done which shows the recovery of the international armaments markets and possible response to the suppliers in this development? Well, the simple answer was in both cases we did no study, because studies have been done by arms experts all around the world, and we relied on their experts to show that A, there was a large degree of malpractice in the arms industry, and secondly, that there was the cyclical nature of this market posed certain dangers. But more tellingly, if I can refer you to page 49, the third to last paragraph, where the writer, be it either Thabo Mbeki or Jacob Zuma, refer to the prime contractors as Blommenfoss, Thompson CFS, Ferrostyle AG, Thyssen, Noordseewerke, Augusta, and Finmechanic, excuse the pronunciation, British Aerospace, and Saab. And goes on to say, and others. And it says, and the writer says, all of which are well known and prestigious international companies. Now, I would argue that again illustrates and demonstrates the lack of insights of Cabinet in general, and the subcommittee in particular, of the nature of the industry. I have very quickly assembled a list, which is an annexure, of just a number of cases of either alleged or proven international arms deal corruption instances, which I'd be happy to respond to if required. Having spent a great deal of time in researching corruption, particularly in the public sector, for many years, but more specifically in the few years that I was director of the Anti-Corruption Center at Stellenbosch University, and having attended many conferences and having accessed much research on the subject, one accepts that the international contention that perhaps only about 10% of corruption is ever discovered, and that largely due to the secretive nature of corruption. That 10% it's further argued is considerably less than 10% when it comes to the arms industry, because the arms industry is the most secret industry in the world, and transactions are conducted in a considerably more confidential way than most transactions from most other industries. So my list mentions a few of the exposés over recent times, bearing in mind that there's possibly many more.
Thank you. But if we go to page 50 of the very same letter, I just want to hear your response, Doctor. I think the then Deputy President writes there and says, natural justice demands that you both substantiate the allegation that the persons, governments and corporations we have mentioned are prone to corruption and dishonesty, and provide even the most rudimentary or elementary evidence that any or all of these acted in a corrupt and dishonest manner. And he continues to say, I believe that it is a most serious matter indeed for our parliament or any section of it to level charges of corruption against foreign governments and corporations without producing evidence to back up such allegations. What would be your response to that?
Yeah, I believe the writer would have been correct in saying that natural justice demands that I substantiate a statement if that statement had been the accusation that the writers are trying to make it out to be, but the statement is there in writing, and one can see that in no ways does it suggest that all of those that acted in a corrupt, dishonest way. There is no such suggestion at all. So I have to dismiss the comments made in this letter in this particular instance.
Thank you, Doctor. And I see on page 202, Annexure GGW 47, it constitutes your response to the very same letter from the Deputy President. Would you want to deal with specific issues from that response?
Yeah, I appear to have filed that letter out of order in our rearrangement documents. But yes, the letter which, with the response which I produced and as part of my evidence in the Shabir Sheikh trial, because the letter signed by then Deputy President Jacob Zuma was a fairly prominent issue in the Shabir Sheikh trial. So I was asked to give my views and give an analysis of the letter, which I did in the document you refer to. If you would want me to go into specifics of my response, I would need to borrow your copy.
Oh, thank you. But I see in the letter, in paragraph 2 thereof, you mentioned that as the respondent finds it difficult to reconcile the character of the letter in question with that of the Deputy President, whom he has long held in high regard, the responses are made with some doubt as to whether the writer of the letter is of the letter in question. Is it that what you earlier said to the Commission, that you doubt the author of the letter?
Yes, I also said earlier on that, of course, I don't know who wrote the letter, but the then Deputy President Jacob Zuma was someone who I had met from time to time and had, on a number of occasions, either sat with him at a function over a dinner or sat with him in Durban Airport en route to Cape Town, and felt that I'd got to know him, and I just couldn't see the type of sarcasm in the letter. I couldn't reconcile that with a more gentle person that I'd come to know. So maybe my doubts are misplaced, but I did have some doubts as to who the author might be.
Thank you. I have given you the copy of your responses. If you want to maybe highlight any issue arising therefrom.
Well, there was, there were a catalogue of issues raised by, let's just say, the Deputy President in his letter, and I felt I looked at the letter, considered it seriously on its merits, but established there were many discrepancies with the truth on points he had raised, many manipulations, including important issues like the omission of the Special Investigation Unit from the first inquiry, the Joint Investigating Team's inquiry into the SDPs. I disputed that I had acted ultra vires in writing in writing to the then President to ask him if he would consider giving a proclamation to the SIU. I took up the issue again on the international arms market. Other issues where I disagreed were the letter misunderstanding the government-to-government agreements. So I just wanted to correct the letter there. I also wanted to correct them on the argument that some ministers had claimed at the time that they wished to appear before Scopa, but we had never had a formal request. The letter seemed to assume that we were rejecting these ministers. And it was later shown that when the ministers requested more formally, that we were happy to bring them before us and have discussions with them. I don't know if there are any specific issues that add too much value to the case that I'm building, but I would invite the chair or yourself to pick up on any issues you'd like me to elaborate on.
No, thank you very much for that explanation, Doctor. Let's revert back to your statement, paragraph 11 thereof. I think you have dealt with some of the issues arising from paragraph 11. Maybe if you can, we can go to page 60. You are referring to an article titled Corruption in Arms Trade there. I just want to find out from you which aspects from this article do you want to highlight on page 60 of the bundle. Page 60 of the bundle, it's an article, the corruption in arms trade.
I have it. I thought you were referring to the list once again. One observation I just draw to your attention from the list, as I say, is a relatively short list, but hopefully it's sufficient to prove my contention that the arms industry, that corruption pervades the arms industry. And you will notice amongst arms suppliers who have been strongly alleged to have been corrupt or have been proven to be corrupt, a number of the suppliers which supplied the arms packages, in our case, in South Africa's case, so happen to have their own hard-earned reputations in that regard. Moving to the document on page 60. Again, I could have produced books and volumes and boxes of documents and papers, but to show that there is a consensus view across people who research the industry that the industry has the problems I've referred to. So I just took an example here of one such article. But the article, in addition, refers to the issue of commissions, which we will come to in one of the second or third arguments that I will build shortly. So it's just to indicate that it's not just me saying these things, that there's a body of literature out there that is research-based, that substantiates what I'm saying.
Thank you. And I see on paragraph 11, you also make a reference there to annexure GGW6, and the background thereof is that you indicate that 32 connected individuals who received discounted motor vehicles in South Africa from an arms supplier would be typical of such influence seeking by the suppliers. Can you just explain that?
Yeah, if we study corruption in the arms industry, there are possibly 6 or 7 types of corruption that are common to cases that have been analyzed and proven. But at the top of that list is the issue of bribery or kickbacks, most often referred to as commissions. The how those bribes or commissions were administered, I suppose, in much the same way that happens in other industries that government might do business with, or industries that might do business with each other. Bribes are paid to secure business. But they can happen from 2 ways. It could be the purchasing company, and it could be an official in the purchasing company say, I want to receive a bribe, so I will initiate that possibility with the supplier. In other words, he will say, I'll make sure you get the deal if I find a Mercedes-Benz parked in my driveway next week. But more often than not, it would seem that it's initiated the other way around. It's the supplier who looks at where the prospective business is. And in the arms industry, we have people who are very skilled, who do an awful amount of homework, will study a government where it's a government business. They will look at how the decisions are going to be made, and most importantly, they'll look at who's who in the overall process. And in identifying those individuals, they'll have ways of giving them sweeteners or small bribes, often with the promise of bigger things to come as the deal takes shape and as they, the supplier, become increasingly the preferred supplier in the minds of the decision makers. So it is in explaining that theory, I just thought I would include this list, which is a factual list of 32 individuals, either South African politicians or public officials. There are a few on the list which are undisclosed because the arms steel employee concerned here, a senior person, sometimes bought these motor vehicles in his own name for onward distribution. Who they went to, we don't know, but there are enough names there to show us how strategic and how insightful bribe payers can be in finding their targets and in building their influence from there. I know this case was cut short simply because the National Director of Public Prosecutions refused to continue with it. I went and fought with him personally, and he showed no interest. I could elaborate on that. Should I? It was said that everybody who received a car could produce an invoice showing, yes, they'd got a modest discount. So from that paperwork, they felt there wasn't a case to. But I happened to have known one of the recipients and managed to extract from him that there was a massive kickback on all those vehicles. As can happen in the real world, there might be Ford, for example, who will have an advert in the newspaper saying, buy your new car from us and we'll give you 10,000 in cash. Because, as I tried to suggest to Mr. Nguka at the time, that it's simply ridiculous to believe that this select group of people who are so particular to the decision-making process of the arms deal, that only they were chosen, and it just so happened that everyone just happened to be in the market for one of the cars that was in this yard, and they all bought these cars. It just goes beyond the bounds of what is believable. But unfortunately, the case wasn't followed through on, as were none of the cases. So over 100 cases given to the NDPP came to naught.
Chair, I see it's about 11 o'clock. I'm not so sure we should proceed.
Maybe let's go on until 1:15. No?
Thank you, Chair. Dr. Woods, thank you for the explanation. Let's proceed then to paragraph 12. I think you have spoken in detail in respect of the corrupt industry, the arms industry being corrupt, and reference to the Transparency International, the World Bank, and U.S. Department of Commerce. But of interest, I just want to refer you on page 6, then you make a reference to Annexure GGW7 and make then allegations that previously there were dubious transactions by BAE, Ferrostal, Thomson, CSF, and SAB. Could you just elaborate on that?
Chair, perhaps I had been moving a little ahead of myself, but I have been making reference to that list, to the GGW7, and pointing out that certain of those arms suppliers the arms suppliers within our package, our SDP, happen to appear, in particular BAE. I'm aware that not all of the cases were proven. There was the BAE case in Saudi Arabia, the Yamamanan deal.
Are you referring to GGW7 on page 65 of the bundle?
Yes. So I just want to make it clear that not all of these cases were proven. The majority of them were. But sometimes the reasons for them not having been proven are worth taking note of, like the Al Yamaman deal, where the deal, much to the disgust of the Serious Fraud Office in the UK, was stopped by then Prime Minister Tony Blair, giving us his reasons that it would bring embarrassment to the British and Saudi Arabian governments. The SFO made it clear that they had a conclusive case.
Just hold on, Dr. Woods. What is the source of the information which is contained on this page 65?
Let me proceed.
Chair, I misheard you. The page you're referring to?
Page 65.
Chair, there are various sources. These are claimed in many books written on the subject, many articles, so many press releases. But they're all cases where there's no contesting that the allegations made here, especially in the cases of those that have been proven. So various, what I say, reputable sources.
Dr. Woods, my question is simple. You have given us a document here. This document contains certain information. What I'm trying to find out from you is, what is the source of this information that we have put before us? It's on page 65.
Well, as I said, there are various sources. I haven't accompanied the page by details of those sources, if that's what you would have required.
Thank you, Doctor. Maybe let's proceed then to paragraph 13 on page 6. Then you are alleging there that for the South African government to claim without any substantiation that the South African arms deal was somehow different to so many other arms deals in terms of possibilities of corruption, without giving any reason as to why this could be the case, is not easy to accept. The denial of any possibilities of corruption in the SDPs by the former members of the executive who have appeared before this commission is therefore incomprehensible. Do you want to expand on that?
Yes, there were many statements by government, including in the press statement that I referred to early on, where they were adamant that no corruption took place in the South African arms deal, and the corruption simply was not possible. And paragraph 13 is my bringing into question, how could they have been so sure, given the arms industry and what it has often proved to be? Why do they think that the South African arms deal was different, was not vulnerable, was not susceptible to corruption, as so many others have been? Again, it depicts a naiveness on their part, and without them giving any reasons as to why our particular arms deal was so meticulously managed. One has to call into question this denialist attitude of theirs. That leads me to the next paragraph, where I say, this leads to the question of why the executive on one hand is so aggressively adamant that the SDPs were free from anything dishonest, but on the other hand were equally as aggressive in their display of anxiety about any investigation into the integrity of the SDPs. There seems to be a contradiction in their behavior there. I would have thought that if the executive were so confident of the integrity of the arms deals, they would have opened their arms wide to any investigation. But they did the opposite. They went to extraordinary lengths to sabotage the investigation and sabotage those who oversaw that investigation.
Thank you, Chair. As we are starting a new topic on page 7, maybe it may be the right time to take an adjournment.
We'll adjourn for 15 minutes. Thank you.